Would you like me to call you when I get an answer?
You crazy SOB! If you discover that some UFOs originate from non-human intelligence and can penetrate any airspace on the planet with impunity, and there's not a darn thing any government or military can do about it, you're darn right I want to know. My name's UFO Jesus, for crying out loud. The gentleman that asked Rachel Crane of CNN if she would like him to call her when he finds out through scientific investigation what UFOs are all about is actually the current administrator of NASA. He was sworn in on May 3rd, 2021. He's the 14th person to hold this position. And the Biden-Harris administration tasked him with creating a vision for the agency. So this is a really, really big deal. And now we know publicly that NASA is going to start researching and investigating UFOs, something that I have desired for quite a long time. This interview is from CNN. Let's dig into it and analyze it and see what it reveals.
Americans have long been fascinated by UFOs, and the public has seen the videos that our Navy pilots have taken. But do you think that we have been contacted by extraterrestrials?
Well, I have talked to those Navy pilots, and they are sure that they saw something real. And of course, we've seen their video from their jets. What is it? We don't know.
Not only does Bill Nelson, the NASA administrator, not know, but neither does the Navy and neither does the Department of Defense. And I'm going to give you a little Easter egg. I have a reliable source that has stated that the UAP task force, as well as the Office of Naval Intelligence, believes that some of these UFOs stem off-world. They do not originate from human civilization. And I've said it before, and I will say it again, and I'm fine going on a record about it. I do believe that the Department of Defense has forensic proof of non-human machines operating in our airspace and in our oceans. And I do believe that's going to come out. I really do believe that's going to come out. It's a process. They've sequestered this away for a long time, and we're moving closer to that transparency. And I think I will be vindicated for this perspective. I'm breaking off from this June 4th interview for just a moment and segueing into a funny tweet that cultural commentator, PhD in math from Harvard University made. His name is Eric Weinstein. He wrote, Pentagon UFO rollout strategy explained. And what I think he is showcasing here is connect the dots. So you see the aliens, you see Earth, and he's basically alluding to the notion that the implementation with all this information coming out of the DoD is for us, the citizens, to connect the dot ourselves and discover the truth ourselves, connecting the dots and recognizing that we're dealing with alien visitation. And I think that's a really clever little meme. So when I say the DoD and the Navy don't know what these are, I do believe the highest echelons of the DoD and Navy know that these are not from human civilization. But they don't know what they are beyond that. And I think that in some sense is part and parcel of not knowing what they are. If all you know is they're machines stemming outside of human civilization, you really don't know much. Someone responded to his meme and wrote, what's your take on this, Eric? Do you seriously think that maybe, just maybe, the DoD actually knows it's not human technology? To which Weinstein responds, I've got nothing. The declassified videos are so far very unimpressive to me, but the change in narrative is very impressive, as are claims of sober military pilots. The major evidence is still the Pentagon's change in narrative until they stop playing footsie under the table. He continues, the statement I'm comfortable with. I believe there is a faction of well-meaning, public-spirited military people who have seen mountains of better data, who believe our military is regularly visited by non-human tech and are pressuring others to roll out this incrementally. I think Weinstein is on the right track here. I mean, let's just look at Lou Elizondo, the former head of ATIP, had a very long and extremely successful career in the DoD. Right before October 11th, 2017, he resigned in protest because of how the DoD was handling this issue, as well as the fact that they were covering it up and not sharing it with the public. And Elizondo has literally been at this doggedly for over 3 years, 3.5 years now. And don't lose sight of the fact that he loved his job at the DOD. He relished it. That was his career. And he was on top of his game. He was extremely successful. Journalists George Knapp and Ralph Blumenthal have stated that they saw evaluations from his time there, and they were of the highest compliment. He received the highest evaluations from his career there. The only reason Elizondo left his post at the DOD and serving his country was to continue serving his country. The mission never stopped. The man assessed that it was necessary for him to leave so that this BS would stop. And as far as I understand, while he was in the building, ladies and gentlemen, it's not as if he ignored this issue. He tried to solve it internally. He tried to get the former head of the Pentagon, the Secretary of Defense, James Mattis, briefed on this. He tried to get the ball rolling. He was unable to do so. And he recognized that for him to solve this problem, he was going to have to leave the DOD. And he did it on account of his loyalty to the DOD, not disloyalty. He did it on account of his loyalty to the American people, not disloyalty. And this mission continues. And he is not the only one pushing forward with this. So is Chris Mellon, who was at one point, I believe, the third highest level of intelligence in the Department of Defense. And there are others, I'm sure, within the DOD who are fighting on our behalf. And there are factions who never want this to come out. In a sense, this is a war, ladies and gentlemen, and we're all fighting it. All we want at the end of the day is transparency on UFOs, transparency about our reality.
But when people think of mysterious things flying in the sky and aliens, they think of NASA. So what have you guys been briefed about in terms of this report? Have you been involved in any way?
I was actually briefed on this a couple of years ago in my capacity on the Senate Armed Services Committee. NASA appropriately is going to look at it through the lens of its scientists, and that's what we're doing.
But do you think the agency should be more involved at this point?
Well, we are, and I've started it. I've been here a month, and I've started it.
Now, I ain't even going to lie. I am a huge fan of the current administrator of NASA, Bill Nelson. And make no mistakes, I will buy that man many rounds of brewski. Now, I say that figuratively. Please drink responsibly. He laid it out. He is the one in charge of creating the vision for the agency on behalf of the Biden administration. And he sees UFOs as important. So why would I not support him? And that's really, really gratifying. And I trust that he's going to continue doing the right thing to push the ball forward, to figure out what is going on with this enigma. Now I bring you to Zach Saichi. He is the creator of the podcast titled Project Human. Now this is a sentiment that he has been repeating consistently. And I have contemplated it to some extent, particularly with military personnel, but as you'll perceive, he has been focusing on this as applied to government officials. And it is one of the greatest, most compelling points you will ever come across. And let's dig in. He writes, "There is a unique shortage here of well-connected people throwing cold water on all the UAP buzz. If you ask me to pinpoint one major thing that feels different about what's playing out versus other times in history, that's it. Skeptics and debunkers abound, of course. That's always the case. I'm talking about officials, representatives, and intellectuals. Where normally you'd see these folks taking a cautious approach, instead, they seem to be doing the opposite, encouraging an open-minded approach. If there was nothing to any of this, it would be deeply irresponsible to take part in perpetuating conspiracy fuel. I would hope everyone is pretty aware of the dangers in encouraging nonsense in a post-Trump era. Anyways, just some observations." At second glance, Saichi does cite officials, and that could fall under the umbrella of military personnel. He also cites intellectuals, which I find really, really interesting. And we've already discussed in this video Eric Weinstein, cultural commentator, PhD from Harvard, certainly an intellectual. And we've also discussed Bill Nelson, the current administrator of NASA, which would fall under the umbrella of an official. And I will tell you right now, never in a million years did I anticipate that NASA would get into the UFO fray, that someone from NASA would say, hey, yeah, we need to get on to this pronto, and I'm going to get me my scientists to look into this and see where the heck these UFOs are originating from. Never in a million years. Never in a million years. This goes to show you that we all have a little cynic living inside of us that wants to get out. And as much as my little cynic wanted to get out, well, it's been squashed by Bill Nelson saying that NASA's going to look into it on behalf of the Biden-Harris administration. So it's getting funky, y'all. Tom Rogan is responding to Christopher Mellon from May 20th. Mellon writes, "It is excellent that another senator, Martin Heinrich, is willing to speak openly, candidly, and logically about the UAP." And Rogan responds, and he's a journalist for the Washington Examiner, and he has clearly paid attention during the briefings. Now, that's a very interesting sentiment. And he is not my source that has conveyed that the Office of Naval Intelligence and the UAP Task Force believes that some of these UFOs originate from off-world. But Rogan seems to be conveying that sort of sentiment. And you'll see why as we dig into what Martin Heinrich has said very recently about UAP.
Bigger thing to worry about if it's a foreign government or if it's aliens.
Oh, option B, much bigger thing to worry
You
about.
think the aliens would be worse?
I cannot imagine if we have, if there is a foreign government that had these kinds of capabilities, I think we would see other indications of advanced technology. I can't imagine that what has been described or shown in some of the videos belongs to any government that I'm aware of.
We all have to be cognizant of our confirmation bias. And it's a pet peeve of mine when people look at what's going on now and interpret it all through their ideological lens. It drives me crazy. And I think some people are going to look at this segment and say, aha, I told you so. I told you so. They're ramping up a big alien threat narrative. That's not what's going on, at least in this clip at all, if you look at it contextually and objectively. When he was asked, what do you think is a bigger threat, a foreign government having this sort of technology or aliens having this sort of technology, he said the latter. But it's very clear he said the latter simply because he doesn't believe this is coming from a foreign government. So because it's not coming from a foreign government, by definition, the bigger potential threat would be that it's coming from aliens. So if you don't make that distinction, then you're just immersing yourself chin deep in confirmation bias, and I don't think you should be doing that in my opinion. But that's just my perspective. Take it however you wish. Beyond that, he said that if this technology that's been observed through, and I'm sure he's referencing pilots visually observing it as well as various sensor collecting mechanisms, that if this technology belonged to a foreign government, he would see indications of that. And he doesn't spell it out what he's referencing, but I imagine the American government has spy satellites all over the place. We have signal intelligence that is spearheaded by the NSA. They're constantly monitoring communications. We have spies on the ground, and we put a lot of money into that. So if this technology was developed by China or Russia, we would probably know. The infrastructure that would be required to develop this kind of technology would be enormous. How are you going to hide that? How are you going to hide that from a highly motivated state who wants to know what's going on? I don't think it can be done. But this is a sentiment that has been repeated often. It's not China, and it's not Russia, and it's not the US. And when Tom Rogan said that Heinrich was paying attention, he was referencing this clip, this video, this interview, if you will. And so I think Rogan knows that the UAP task force and maybe even the Office of the Office of Naval Intelligence does not believe that these machines are stemming from any any sector of human civilization.
You've seen all the evidence. I'm not asking you what it is, but are you more skeptical, less skeptical, or the same on UFOs and life on other planets than you were before you were the DNI?
Well, again, I don't look at it from the standpoint of life on other planets. I look from the standpoint of national security, and here's what troubles me right now, Trey, is a lot of people say, well, maybe it's Russia or China, but some of the things that have been publicly talked about, we know for a fact from the intelligence community, we have high confidence that things like transmedium properties and hypersonic speed, meaning vehicles that go at 5 times the speed of sound, or Mach 5, Russia and China clearly didn't have those in 2004 when some of these things were cited and recorded.
Now, this is a pretty interesting statement from the former DNI, John Ratcliffe. He said, I don't look at it from the perspective of whether or not these machines originate from off-world civilization somewhere or something even more exotic. He looks at it through the lens of national security, and that makes sense because that's the framework from which he comes from. He's not a scientist. He's not an astronomer or an astrophysicist or an engineer. He was the director of national intelligence. They're not tasked with looking at this through a scientific lens. Nevertheless, his statement is pretty obvious to me. He said it doesn't come from China or Russia. These machines were spotted and recorded using highly sophisticated sensor data collecting mechanisms back in 2004. They don't belong to any nation state. He knows that, in my opinion. That's his assessment. And that's the assessment of the Department of Defense. And it's an assessment, and I'm going to say this as obnoxiously as I can. In my opinion, it is an assessment based on scientific proof, highly rigorous. It's not a bunch of people who are simply dense or UFO fans or are immersed in their bias, or they're just at the whims of human fallibility. This has been going on for decades. Decades. It's not like it's one event and they're all scratching their head and massaging their beard and like saying, and maybe they kind of messed up. No. This has been going on for decades. Event after event after event. Satellite data, Spy 1 radar, acoustics, whatever else they have up their sleeve, sonar, electro-optical recordings, infrared recordings, they have it. It's obvious, I'm telling you. It's and granted, I kind of contradict myself. On the one hand, I'm adamant, they know we're not alone. On the other hand, I know I'm fallible and maybe I'm getting this all wrong. But when you consider the stakes, if I'm this confident that they know we're not alone and we are not alone, the only rational response is to be loony. Now, just to give you a glimpse of how entrenched this new perspective and narrative has made itself as it pertains to UFOs, I'm going to give you a clip of a show called Absolutely Mental by Ricky Gervais and Sam Harris. And in it, Sam Harris talks about what's happening now, but there's also an amazing Easter egg in this following clip, so I advise that you listen very carefully.
The rumors that I've heard, and again, this is still just in the mode of rumors, but perhaps soon to be confirmed, is that our intelligence services and the Pentagon are going to tell Congress that this is real, right? This is a real phenomenon, right? It's not that UFOs have been explained to the satisfaction of the government. On the contrary,
they'd have to change their name.
They have seen that there's technology that really can't be of human origin, right? That they don't think this is the Chinese or the North Koreans or some other part of human society producing technology that is strange, and they can't write it off as anomalies of perception. I mean, there's just too much radar data. There's too much satellite imagery at this point. And the stuff they're sitting on that's top secret is much better than anything that's been leaked out, right? So this is still something that's just...
I'm cynical when someone says, this cannot be of human origin. That sounds to me like a 50s movie.
Yeah, no, exactly. And many of the details I've heard also sound very goofy, but this is probably premature to even talk about this, but, I have someone reached out to me and has assured me that, I'm going to be on a Zoom call with, former heads of, the CIA and Office of Naval Research and people, whose bona fides are very easy to track. And they're concerned about the messaging around all of this to the public and dampening down panic and conspiracy theories. But what is being promised here is a disclosure that is, frankly, either the most alarming or the most interesting thing in the world, depending on how you take it.
It really is surprising to see skeptic, neuroscientist, intellectual Sam Harris being aware and up to speed on what's going on, at least to some extent, on this new process. And he spoke about the 180-day report that is due by at least June 25th. He also said something really, really interesting. He said that someone reached out to him and said that you're going to be on a Zoom call with ex-CIA heads and Office of Naval Research heads and so forth to discuss with you how the government can deal with what's going on to, what I perceive, he said, alleviate conspiracy theories and panic and so forth with this sea change that is happening. Am I surprised? No. I'm not surprised only because I do believe this process is actually happening. And Sam Harris is the perfect person to reach out to. He is an absolute brilliant individual and really understands how ideas can penetrate the human mind and how that can lead to various kinds of behaviors. So he would be a very good person to consult for how to engage this process from a governmental standpoint in a way that minimizes problems with the way people see and perceive what's happening and how they respond to it. But, Sam Harris is one of the most sober-minded people you will ever meet, in my opinion, or at least from my subjective perspective. He's a very rational guy, and he's in the fray. And to me, that is a microcosm of a macrocosm. This sea change is happening in a way that is permeating all of at least American society. Now, it's true it hasn't really reached anywhere near the same levels with other countries, but I have good reason to believe that eventually it absolutely will. Because I don't believe the United States are the only ones that know, and I believe that they do know, as well as I believe that other countries know, that we are simply not alone. They have the forensic proof, proving that there are technologies in our airspace and in our oceans that are maneuvering in ways that no nation state is capable of. Now, I want to change pace real quickly and go over some of the counter arguments that have emerged very recently against the arguments made by Mick West. And I know people don't like Mick West to be focused on so much, or at least some people don't, but you have to understand that he is the most prominent person on this planet making arguments about how all UFOs, of which we have examples of, demonstrate nothing more than prosaic explanations. And a lot of people believe what he says as if it's gospel. And I've never agreed with that. I've always felt that it was credulous to see a Mick West argument and then be like, yep, that man's got it right. Well, maybe. I mean, he is working with limited data and he is fallible like the rest of us. So I wouldn't be so fast to come to that conclusion, but that's just me. But let's go over these tweets real quick. Alpha check. Since the release of Chris Sodi's 78's analysts of GoFast, I've talked privately with a number of F-18 pilots. I initially believed he was wrong in dismissing the ranging data. Every pilot I have spoken to has said he is not. This surprised me and adds more complexity to the event. We really need to listen to the pilots. They know what they're talking about. This, in many cases, has been their profession for decades, and more than just their own life, depends on a deep understanding of the lethal tools at their disposal. And then Steve Nikolic replies, quite a plot twist. People mistake numbers and systems as rigid, but real-world applications often have nuance. Mick West knows this as a programmer. There's tons of quirks in all this supposedly rigid code we write that's only learned with experience. pays to listen to experience. Now, to give you some further context with the previous segment, recall that Alpha Check stated that he spoke with multiple F-18 pilots who said that the range data is not accurate and can be very off the mark. The following is F-16 pilot Chris Lehto's YouTube channel, in which he responds to Mick West's blunder.
See it visually, they can't pick it up on the radar. Why? Because there's no ranging. Okay, this range that comes up that Mick West says is like this, it's obviously at this range. It is not at that range, man. The jet doesn't know where this thing is. That is a guess. Okay, there's no radar tracking data on this thing. They don't fire the laser, right? We can get laser ranging if we shoot a laser at it, but they don't fire it. I bet they do, but they don't fire it. So the jet does not know how far away this thing is.
Now, in addition to 2 videos by Chris Lehto, who is an ex-F-16 pilot, debunking Mick West's material, Alpha Check has also come onto the scene, and he has made 2 extremely compelling videos debunking the conclusion of Mick West. And I'm going to give a direct quote from the first video he published because it gets to the heart of the matter. Quote, "What I'm going to do here is show you how, on a very basic level, his theory that Underwood caught a friendly F-18 on his APFLIR makes little sense when armed with even an amateur's understanding of how sensors and systems correlate in a modern fighter, and especially when data linked through a whole fleet of combat systems." He goes on later to say, "With a limited understanding of the systems and sensors and use, I know what it wasn't, and it wasn't a friendly military or civilian aircraft." And of course, that was Mick West's strongest hypothesis. I watched his video more than once, and I can tell you right now, it's going to be difficult not to be persuaded by his argument. And it goes to show that Mick West's approach to this whole encounter is extremely flawed because it's predicated on exclusively a couple seconds of video as opposed to the larger environment that has to be taken into account for in order to have any hope of reaching an objective assessment. Now, I am going to link below in the description to both Chris Lehto's videos that attempt to debunk Mick West's material, as well as both Alpha Check's videos that attempt to debunk Mick West's material. Now, whether they debunked it or not is up to you, but I'm going to give you that information because I think it's really important for the sake of the debate. Now, the following is from June 4th, 2021, with the Press Secretary John F. Kirby of the Pentagon. Pay very close attention to what Jeff Skogel of Task and Purpose asks him in this presentation.
Jeff, show.
Hey, John, happy birthday. There's no way that I can, sugarcoat this. I was talking to a gentleman about the UAP report, and he contends the Pentagon has alien bodies and crafts. So I just wanted to run this past you. Does DOD have these things, and if so, where?
Jeff, the UAP task force is really designed to take a look at these unexplained aerial phenomena, try to help us get a better understanding of them. Again, I'm not going to get ahead of the report that the DNI will submit that we are helping, obviously, and providing input to, and I think I'll just leave it at that, Jeff.
We're not in Kansas anymore, compadre.
Well, Jessica, I'm going to have to agree with you. With the White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki and the Pentagon Press Secretary John F. Kirby getting asked questions about UFOs consistently, persistently, and aggressively, as you just saw with that crazy clip with Skogel asking that question. We are not in Kansas anymore, compadre. The following clip is with Laura Coates in place of Don Lemon because he wasn't available. And this segment aired on June 4th. And interestingly enough, Elizondo was on CNN and Fox News on June 4th, so the man's been quite busy.
I think the fact that you have pilots separated by decades, if not generations, reporting the same type of observations, describing the same, what is essence, the same object, a 40-foot long, whether it's a white flying butane tank or a white flying Tic Tac or a white flying lozenge. At the end of the day, they're describing the same thing. They're just describing it from the context of the generation that they're growing up in. So we're definitely, I think it's safe to presume that we're seeing the same objects in the sky time and time and time again. And obviously that's a concern, because if the argument is that there is some sort of foreign technology that has somehow mastered this and is 1,000 years ahead of the United States, and oh, by the way, has been demonstrating this technology for the last 70 years, I think we've got bigger problems on our hands.
Well, speaking of that, I mean, because of the pattern, because of the overtime you're talking about, I mean, if we don't have an answer soon on what exactly these flying phenomenon are, is that a failure for our national security?
Well, it is certainly it would be a failure, an intelligence failure that would eclipse 9/11 by orders of magnitude if it turns out that this is some sort of foreign adversarial technology. But I think it's important. We have to keep all options on the table. There's a lot of information right now that suggests it's not.
So the way the conversation is expressing itself right now goes as follows. Firstly, we've ruled out that what we're dealing with in these encounters is American technology. The 180-day UFO report has been discussed by people who've seen what's going to be in it. And at the very minimum, it's been established from our intelligence agencies and what they know that this is not governmental American technology. So that's been established. So where the conversation is right now is that it could be Chinese or Russian technology. But there's a huge caveat with that you have to take in mind. And that caveat was within that New York Times article that I published, that I spoke about recently, that was discussing the 180-day UFO report. And that caveat is that if it is Chinese or Russian technology, that means the most powerful military on the planet with a military budget that makes the other nations' military budgets pale in comparison has been leapfrogged by an adversary, China or Russia. So no matter how you slice this, with the way the conversation is developing, it is a huge deal. And it doesn't matter if you're Mr. Skeptic or Mr. Believer. It doesn't make any difference. Objectively, what people are saying is that it's if it's Chinese or Russian, the United States national security apparatus and the American people are in trouble, objectively. And if it's not Chinese or Russian, we already know it's not American. Therefore, let me just put it bluntly, we are not alone in the universe. That's the conversation right now. Now, you could say, well, maybe they're all getting it wrong. You know, maybe it's just all misidentifications. Maybe it's just a bunch of mistakes and the technology being reported really isn't nearly as sophisticated as people in the national security apparatus ascertain. Yeah, it's possible. I wouldn't place my money there. I wouldn't place my money there at all. We've already heard from the pilots and the radar operators, and the indication is that the sensor data correlates with their experience. So I don't know why anyone would place their bet there. That doesn't make sense to me. It seems like a losing bet. It seems like you're betting against the house if you're going to go that route. Now, a lot of people are critiquing the fact that as the conversation is unfolding right now, that we're saying it could be Chinese or Russian when people know that it's not. That is a fair critique, but maybe it is a critique that is not incorporating the fact that this is a process and not an event. Maybe that aspect of the situation is not being considered adequately enough. Now, if you were to ask Elizondo what he believes this is, I can guarantee you he believes it's non-human intelligence. I'm just going to be blunt about it. But And you could argue that he's putting unjustified probability of it being Chinese or Russian. Yeah, you could argue that. But it's not like he's lying, in my opinion, because there's always the possibility that it could be Chinese or Russian. No matter how much evidence you have, you could always make the argument it could be. It's possible. I think we are heading in a direction where not only is the American government going to acknowledge that it's not Chinese or Russian, but foreign governments are going to do the same. That's what's undertaking right now. You are living through, in my opinion, the greatest historical process in the history of our species. I'm going to call it like I see it. You can come back to this video a year from now, 2 years from now, and we'll get in the ring. We'll get in the ring and see who won. But I don't even know what that means, but I'm not going to edit it out. I already stated it. It's staying in the video. I'm not going to edit it out. But that's what's really going on right now. And bear in mind that if you focused on that previous clip, Elizondo still made a great argument that what we're dealing with is not Chinese or Russian. He said that the pilots have been seeing the same thing for decades. You know, how is it possible that 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, China or Russia had this level of technology? Think about that. So it's not like it's not like he is ignoring the strong arguments that it's non-human intelligence. It's just that he is not completely removing himself in the discussion that it could be Chinese or Russian, which is strategic. Because if the whole conversation was, it is non-human intelligence, do you really think that would be a viable or strategic way to get Congress involved? I don't think it would be. So that has to be part of the equation. Now, do I think that Marco Rubio thinks it's Chinese or Russian? No, I do not. I don't think he thinks that. And maybe I shouldn't be saying that. I can't read his mind, but I think he's been briefed with the higher level fidelity data, and he probably understands that China or Russia most likely does not have those capabilities. Now, it is a very complex situation because it has been sequestered away. Now, how much of it is lawful, how much is it unlawful, I don't know. Stephen Bassett calls it the truth embargo. He doesn't like to use the term cover-up because cover-up implies illegality. And maybe Bassett has a point because a lot of the sequestering away of this understanding in reality is under the auspice of national security and has been written into our very laws. That's about all I'm going to say about this. It's a very complex situation. Ultimately, no, the world is changing.
The house of cards is falling, baby.
Just as I'm filming this, I discovered on Twitter that Lou Elizondo stated on Washington Post Live that China is attempting to bring the UFO subject to the United Nations. I can't cover that. This video is going to be north of 40 minutes. You are very forgiving people, and I appreciate that. But I will cover that in a future video, so don't forget to subscribe. I will just quickly say this about this amazing development. Why would the Chinese government do this? And I will say that I'm a little cynical. I think the Chinese government knows UFOs are real, just like the United States government does, and that they're not human intelligence. And they want a piece of the pie, of the legacy of this transition. And so that's driving them to want to take action in this arena. Now, I know that's cynical. Maybe they're doing it out of the goodness of their hearts. I don't know. They could be. I don't want to be overly cynical. I'm cynical of my own government, by the way. Maybe some people within the Pentagon, for example, are pushing for transparency because they know that the nation that does the most for contributing to this transition will get the most credit. So I'm trying to apply my cynicism equally. But then again, I'm sure there's people within the Chinese government and the American government who just want this foolishness to end. Or furthermore, another possibility is some people have both perspectives at the same time. They see it as an advantage to contribute to this because it will lead to a legacy for their nation, but they also see the pragmatism of it. So I'm just throwing this out there to give you some perspective on why any nation may push for what's been true forever. Now, I'm going to end this with a couple tweets by Eric Weinstein, who has truly been at the forefront of this. And I think it's important to document the conversation going on, not just from the media, but just intellectuals as well, because it really underscores the zeitgeist that is ensuing. Here, Eric Weinstein says, and this is from June 7th, on UFO UAP, note the absence of top physicists or scientists more generally, or academians more generally than that. Any science fiction author would know to get our leading physicists, geometers, evolutionary biologists, linguists on this if it's real. Okay, so where are they? He continues. There has been a tiny response. Mostly we see military, ex-military, and civilians UFO community commenting. The number of top relevant academians commenting is near zero. This is very odd because we know from the Manhattan Project that you need to tap your academics. Thoughts? I respond to his initial tweet. They are still too cautious of the subject because of stigma or dogma. There's nothing to UFOs. Sooner or later, they will begin to warm up to this long neglected enigma. Now, I caught these tweets of him today, June 8th, and I'm just going to go ahead and share them. The UAP data is all of ours, not the military's exclusively. It is scientific data. It is physics data. We need to get it to our physicists, not just our aerospace companies and defense contractors. The Institute for Advanced Study, fully informed, should be leading discussion. This is ridiculous. Wow, you stuck with me for 40 plus minutes. I can't believe it. I feel like we just had a picnic together. Isn't that wonderful? Developing relationships is wonderful. If you'd like to support this channel, you can support me on Patreon. You can become a YouTube member. You could buy merch. I sell t-shirts. Or you could do a one-time donation or anything like that. All of that potential is in the description below. Or you could just slap a like on this bad boy, and I will appreciate it so much. And if you're still listening, boy, you are special. If you are still listening right now, I'd like you to write the word mango in the comment section below, so that I know who listened the whole way through. You know what they say, Santa Claus knows whether you've been naughty or nice, so I suggest you be nice. And I will see you in the next episode. Special thanks to all my YouTube members, patrons, people who have bought merch and who have given me one-time donations. I honestly couldn't do without you, and I appreciate it so much. Thank you so much.